We're back here on the platform today speaking with Dr. Duane Sands, and we are looking at a number of issues that we have in our country today. Dr. Sands, there's no doubt that we need transformation in our country, don't we?
I think we have been afraid to embrace many things progressive. And I'm not suggesting that we throw away our values, by no means. But certainly the approach that we have taken to not talk about certain things. We have been unprepared to address the issues of pedophilia, meaning child abuse, child sexual abuse in this country, so that we have so many of our young women being raped by older men in particular.
But there's a law on the books on that, right?
So we have a law on the books, and yet every year hundreds of young girls under the age of 16 and more than 100 under the age of 14 are impregnated in this country.
It's a crime.
It is a crime, but it is not a crime that's prosecuted.
But how can you prosecute someone when a girl child under the age of 16 is not prepared to say who went with her, who is the father? You know,
legally, she has no say.
Yes, what are you going to do?
Parents
You're going to
have responsibility for her. Well, I mean, she's already been raped.
Yes.
So, I mean,
and she doesn't want to tell you.
She is a victim.
And she is saying to you that, listen, I am not going to tell you who
she
did
is
it.
A minor. She has no choice.
So what you going to do, beat it out of her?
No, do DNA testing.
And on whom?
In large part because I think what is happening in this country is that we have challenges with the protection of our children. And one of the constitutional referendum questions speaks to the concept of filius nullius, and that is that the father, that the child who is unmarried is his mother. That a child born to an unmarried Bahamian male has no father.
Right.
Now, we have sought to get around that in the Protection of Children's Act, I think it's called. But, you know, the question in 2014 of whether or not Bahamian men in particular will take responsibility for the children that they father is a major issue. Primarily because we need to see to it that every single child in this country has opportunities to eat, to be educated, to be clothed, to be loved. Now, that is a cultural hot potato, wouldn't you say?
It's a phenomenon.
Because you have so many Bahamian men who are proud that they have 50 children or 60 children or 70 children that they might be able to write down on a sheet of paper you know, what their names are, but they are in no way involved in their care.
Right.
Now, bear in mind that I know I'm getting myself in hot water right now because the response would be that's the way we do it. When you look at the issue of abortion in the Bahamas, we don't talk about that. We refuse to talk about it, in large part because, you know, the belief is that Bahamians don't have sex. We don't have sex in the Bahamas, and we certainly don't get pregnant in the Bahamas.
But there are laws about abortion as well.
I put it to you, Mr. Jones, that perhaps it is time for us to revisit some of these taboos, not to destroy cultural, religious, Christian principles, but to deal with the secular concerns that the reality of life in the Bahamas brings. Okay? The issue of marijuana is something that I think we ought to revisit. There are many issues of life in the Bahamas that we ought to revisit. Certainly, the question ought to be put to Bahamians as to whether or not decriminalization of small quantities of marijuana is something that they think is a reasonable approach in order to deal with the first time or second time offender.
Don't you feel, Dr. Sands, that the government and the political directorate the political directorate is often frustrated in seeking to achieve certain things because of the position of the church and the seeming veto power that some church leaders or some church folk believe that they have over a secular government?
I'll answer it this way. I think that we enjoy and are hemmed in by a very strong religious movement in the Bahamas. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. What I think is the problem is that we have used the church when we want the church's support and influence. And then when we feel as if the church ought to step aside, it makes it very difficult because we have treated the church as if we will sample its issues or views on only those matters that we know they will be for us. I'm talking about politicians or historical politicians. The question of whether we are a Christian nation or a secular democracy is something that has arisen, and it becomes very important when you talk about tolerance. It becomes very important when you talk about ensuring the rights of all. I am a Christian. I'm happy to admit that. I happen to have been brought up in a Christian home. And I think that the Bahamas is better because of its Christian ties. But I will be the first to admit that there are people who are not Christian who ought to enjoy the same benefits and the same rights as Christians in the Bahamas.
Yes. Now, having said that, there are some theocratic kind of thinking individuals in the Bahamas who really believe that the theocracy of doing things might be better. Not necessarily being Christian, because Christians make up the political directorate. There are Christians who run things in the Progressive Liberal Party, who run things in the Free National Movement if the Free National Movement comes to power. So you would expect your Parliament, House and Senate, to be made up largely of people who are Christians or followers of the Christian faith.
Yes.
And so you would expect a certain level of Christianity to guide policy making in the Bahamas.
Yes.
But you have in the Bahamas where you have certain church leaders who believe that they ought to have some veto or some say in whether or not some legislation is passed or the other.
The beauty of Christianity is Christianity teaches tolerance, forgiveness, love thy neighbor, love the sinner but abhor the sin.
Yes.
And so on and so forth.
Right.
So true Christianity would be an excellent model to base governmental policy. True Christianity.
Right.
When we now get into the various permutations of the Christian expression, and I'm an Anglican, some people are Catholic, some are Baptist, some are Methodist. We may not be so far apart, okay? But occasionally now, a brethren or a Baptist might say that my expression, or let's say Seventh-day Adventist or Jehovah's Witness, might say that my expression of my Christian faith is inadequate or incomplete or wrong, and that there's no room for my way of looking at the mighty God that I choose to serve. It's the same God, mind you. Mm-hmm. And so I think when we start to get into that type of quibbling or quarreling, that we're not talking about Christianity, we're talking about religion. When you bring in Buddhism and other types of religious expression, There are Muslims in the Bahamas. There are Jews in the Bahamas. They are entitled, in the same way as you or I, to enjoy the Bahamas, free of religious persecution. That's enshrined in our Constitution.
Right.
And I think that as we proceed as politicians and as all people, that we should seek to work to make this a better place, a more tolerant place for all. And that is true Christianity.
Dr. Sands, you have been a member of the Senate. You are the deputy chairman of the Free National Movement. And I am told that you are interested in the leadership. That is right.
That is correct.
Yes. Are you campaigning for it?
I'm not actively campaigning at this point. I think, Mr. Jones, that you would know that the process of making a run for any political office in the Bahamas is no longer you wake up one morning and you decide, well, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. I think it deserves a tremendous amount of prayerful consideration. I think you need to make sure that if you're an honest person, that you can actually survive by getting or staying involved in politics. And that is the key. If you're honest, yeah. This is a very difficult and expensive thing to do.
Our late friend, Sir Clement Maynard, said to us on one program that if you want leadership, you have to take it. If you want leadership in a political party, you have to take it. You cannot be nipping around the edges and playing with the periphery of things. You have to get in and take leadership.
I think there's obviously some truth to that. Nobody surrenders power willingly. I doubt seriously that the Right Honorable Prime Minister, who I find to be an affable and likable person, will demit office without a fight. But we will take him out. And we will not do so in any way other than above board in a fair and reasonable battle. But mark my words, this is his last few years in office.
Having said that, and having admitted that you are interested in leading the Free National Movement, it begs the question whether you are dissatisfied with the current leadership of the Free National Movement.
Well, you know, this obviously makes for wonderful news and salacious, sexy news that, boy, there's going to be a night of long knives in the Free National Movement. I think, on the contrary, we are focused primarily at the clear and present danger of ridding the Bahamas of the Progressive Liberal Party, and then in trying to determine what will constitute the most effective team of the Free National Movement. Right now, we have one leader. That leader deserves and has my support. When we go into convention and I make a decision as to what office I'm going to vie for, respectfully, openly, and candidly, I will give it my best shot. At some point in time, I will announce to you and to the Bahamian public what office it is that I intend to seek. Bear in mind that I currently enjoy the office of the Deputy Chairman of the Free National Movement. If you say that's either number 5 or number 6,
yeah,
that ain't bad.
But there's no secret that you are interested in being leader of the Free National Movement, and as a consequence, you are interested in being the next Prime Minister of the Bahamas.
I think any patriot with political aspirations will see him or herself as being able to fulfill that role, as I do. And, you know, as much as it would be simple for me to say, Mr. Jones, as of the 29th of September, I hereby announce my candidacy, I'm not prepared to do that. At the appointed time, having thought about it, having considered it, line my ducks up in a row so that Duane Sands can honestly serve in whatever role possible. If the cards stack up that I can do so, I will make that announcement.
Currently, you believe, given the circumstances in the country, you believe that the Free National Movement can win if an election is called tomorrow?
I definitely do.
Well, if you definitely believe that you can win tomorrow, why change the leadership?
Well, I mean, the question of whether all of the players are in the right place on the bus is something for an internal consideration of the Free National Movement. And when we put together the team that we sell to the Bahamian public, I can guarantee you it's going to be the best team that we all line up behind. And we say to the Bahamian public, look, we know that there are some challenges in this country. We know that we have some problems. But if you come with us, we are going to work for you. Now, who's in the front seat? Who's riding shotgun? Who's right behind? I think that is where there may be some shuffling.
There's a force that emerged in the country in recent times, the Bahamian Democratic Party, headed by Mr. McCartney. And there are some political observers who believe that that party will be strong enough to either spoil things for the Free National Movement or displace the Free National Movement in an election that will be coming up in 2017. Do you think that your chances will be spoilt by the presence of the DNA?
Anybody who dismisses the DNA, and most importantly, those individuals that support the DNA, I would go so far as to say is politically misinformed and misguided. There are many people
who support the DNA are misguided.
No. I say anybody who dismisses the DNA or their supporters is politically misguided.
Okay. All right.
Okay? So they have demonstrated in the last election that they were able to spoil, certainly, many seats. Not a single candidate for the DNA won. Not a single candidate, not even the leader. And yet, they made a significant difference in the outcome of the election. So by that alone, they cannot be dismissed. The question is whether or not the DNA, seen as an independent political body, has proven itself to have addressed the issues in a thoughtful, progressive way or not. As a Free National Movement or as an opposition force, we are going to have to strategize as to how we're going to deal with not only the PLP, but the DNA. And the Progressive Liberal Party will have to do the same thing. The same way that they sought to absorb the NDP. And I imagine they're probably regretting that decision right now, but they did. They absorbed the NDP in the last election.
But do you think the NDP had any support that was worthy of any serious consideration?
Whether they had or did not, certainly there are a number of members of the NDP who were absorbed into the Progressive Liberal Party, elected to Parliament, and now creating one holy hell for the PLP. So the decisions that are made may seem to be expedient. We need this group, we need that group, etc., and you may come to regret it. And so you have to be very, very careful and cautious and not overreach, but be very, very careful. So the strategy that you employ or that we employ in terms of how we seek to blend the opposition forces, to cherry pick from the opposition or what have you, will determine whether or not the Free National Movement learned any lessons in the last election, and whether come 2017 we will end up with 50% plus one.
Do you see the base of the Free National Movement improving, or do you see your base being eroded as a result of the presence of the DNA?
You know, the Bahamian population is so difficult to read. If you listen in the bar rooms, in the restaurants, on the back porches, you would imagine that the Free National Movement and the anti-PLP sentiment is at a record high. That's certainly what it sounds like, where everybody's complaining about the government. Now, how many of those people would mark an X next to the torch, and how many would mark an X in support of the DNA, I'm not prepared to say. Certainly, I am not impressed that, that any of us can rest on our laurels. We have to actively go out and seek support by demonstrating visionary, progressive, considerate views that solve problems of ordinary Bahamians. How do I get my electricity costs down? How do I deal with my matters of finance? I'm worried that my children are not going to be adequately educated. What about health care? These are the types of issues that Bahamians are concerned about.
Let's talk about health care when we return. This is our final break here on our program. We'll come right back.